And welcome in the Believe It Ole Miss podcast, a part of the Believe Network. Awful grateful to have Adam Luckett today. He's on Twitter/X at Adam Luckett KSR. He's, of course, with Kentucky Sports Radio. That's an affiliate of On3. And Adam, thanks for joining us today. Obviously, this game between Ole Miss and Kentucky, there's no need to kind of rehash last year. We kind of know how that came about. This year, this game's got kind of a new meaning, new quarterbacks at both places, but the same head coaches. I know you've got your thoughts on the game, but I know a lot of Ole Miss fans are excited to have a chance to play a Kentucky team that may be a little bit different than last year, but obviously hoping for a different outcome.
Yeah, and a lot of transfers, both sides, a lot of new faces for each, and a huge game. I know it's big for Ole Miss. The revenge factor, obviously, last year Kentucky kind of really stunned them down there in Oxford for Kentucky. It's been a weird offseason. There's been some unrest, I'd say, in the fan base, and it's a program that really needs a home win, a big home win, and this could be a spot where they could get that. So, really big game, I think, for Kentucky, because there is a lot of angst, I think, right now with kind of how the Stoops tenure is going. And so they're going to try to go, back to back here as a double-digit dog, trying to beat Ole Miss 2 years in a row.
Before we go too deep in the offense and defense, what's the tenor of the Wildcat fan base right now, specifically with head coach Mark Stoops?
Yeah, I think you look at would say the online, a big portion of the online fan base is pretty close to being done or already done, ready to move on. I think when you get into more like the gym pop and the people that, a lot of people that go to the games, it's more like wait and see, but we need to see something sooner rather than later. I think there's two games really early in the year. This one, and then when they go to South Carolina, September 27th, they need to win one of those games. If they don't, I think there's going to be a lot of tapping out by the fan base. And then just where they are throughout the rest of the season is going to be interesting to see. Stoops has a huge buyout, he's not really on the hot seat. But the fan base is getting close, I would say, to getting checked out. And so they need something good to happen. They enter this game, Brad, having lost 7 consecutive SEC home games. They're 3-15, I believe, in the last 4 or 5 years against power conference teams at home. So they've actually won on the road, been more than respectable on the road, but they haven't won at home. And so that's an ugly streak that's starting to become prevalent now. And so it's a program that reset its roster in the offseason, 50 new players. It was the first time they've ever done an overhaul that big, but they didn't really change any coaches. So they pressed a hard reset on the roster, and they're trying to show that they can do it, flip it this way. But Saturday is really the first big test to see if they've made the changes that they've talked about and then they think they needed to make.
Kind of didn't plan on asking this question, but you kind of brought up a good point. Why do you think that this Stoops-led team is so much better on the road versus at home? That's kind of an odd trend.
Yeah, I think defense travels, their style of play, ground and pound, play good defense. I think they typically, as a program, they do best is kind of the chip on their shoulder. So I think they kind of have embraced kind of those road environments. It's us against kind of the world kind of thing. And I feel like there's not as much pressure. You start losing a couple at home, some of that pressure builds up. And I think some of it is just how the schedule has fallen sometimes. Kentucky was playing good football, really, outside of the South Carolina game at home, which was weird last year. They played some of their best football early in the season. And then when they had some of the home games was later in the year when everything started falling apart, when they played Vanderbilt, when they played Auburn, when they played Louisville. So I think a combination of those factors, but I think just stylistically, I think they're kind of built to play well on the road because of just how they kind of what their identity is and how they go about their business.
Before we get to the rosters, kind of looking at this game in a 10,000 feet view, is it fair to say, even though the rosters on both teams are going to be significantly different than they were last year, the recipe for success for Mark Stoops and this Kentucky team is very similar to last year? Keep Ole Miss's offense off the field, churn the clock as much as possible, and just make it an ugly game. Is that fair to say?
100%. They want to do 3 things: ball control offense, do not give up big plays on defense, and shrink the total possessions. Like if you look at the drive chart at the end of the game, if this thing is over 10 or 11 possessions, probably I would say it probably favors Ole Miss. If it's hanging around 10 or 9, then I think Kentucky's probably got a really good chance to win the football game. That's what they want to do, and it's really imperative this week just from Ole Miss's style of play. But that's kind of their goal every week. And it's why sometimes when they play Georgia, they've been able to hang around, is just because the game's just, there's not a lot of chances for both teams to score. And so you look up and it's like, wow, this is kind of a close game when you didn't expect it.
Looking at this Kentucky offense, a very familiar name that Ole Miss fans, in fact, in the as you heard on the Wednesday teleconference, Lane Kiffin even made mention that Zach Calzada is in his 10th year and thrown for over 1 million yards or what have you. So he's been around the Southeastern Conference for a number of years. I had a chance to watch the replay of the Kentucky and Toledo game. I thought he managed the offense very well. Really, nothing just jumps off the page. I thought they were able to just about out athlete Toledo in the latter part of the game and kind of opened it up. But your early thoughts on Zach Calzada at quarterback for the Wildcats?
Yeah, the first performance was rough, was subpar, was below expectations. Kentucky's passing game under Stoops has always struggled. It's always been towards the bottom of the conference. So, you didn't have super high expectations, but the sell with Calzada was the experience would give them a higher floor and more consistency week to week. So it was alarming that that's what's the passing performance you saw in week one. It's not just Calzada, even the receivers they brought in. They just brought in a lot of guys who've had experience and playing time, and tried to build it kind of through the aggregate at receiver. So all of that is kind of alarming. But at the end of the day, Kentucky is going to win football games based on how well they run the football and how well they play defense. And so while the passing game struggled, they've won games without good passing performances in the past. They had like 60 yards passing against Georgia last year and arguably should have won the game in Kroger Field last year. So they need better, specifically on third down. They need to be able to extend drives on when they drop back to pass. They need to be able to hit some deep shots off play action eventually. And that was what we saw a lot in that week one. It was a lot of just, slinging it deep, trying to hit a big bomb. And so they need to hit on some of those, but that's not going to be a strength of the team. And that's not really what's going to tell like Kentucky's story this year. Whether it's success or failure really is going to be, can they play their style of play? And their style of play is being able to run the football and play in defense. And so running the football is essential. And if you want to take Kentucky totally out of their game, if you can stop the run, then they're going to be in big trouble.
Basically, from some people that I talked to, Seth McGowan was going to be that guy that got north and south, could fly, could go fast. And then Dante Dowdle would be the guy that's kind of the bruiser. Wasn't necessarily the case against Toledo. In fact, I thought Dowdle looked really good running the football. That's a name that Ole Miss fans remember. They recruited him hard out of Picayune High School in Mississippi, would eventually go to Oregon, then transfer to Nebraska, and then ended up at Kentucky. I thought he probably deserved the game ball in the win over Toledo. That running back room surprised you a little bit how good Dowdell looked.
Yeah, McGowan was a guy they really kind of gushed about and kind of sounded like their RB1, where the early returns on Dante Dowdell was that he was going to be involved in the offense, but it wasn't like we weren't really sure, but we knew like short yardage, he was going to be like maybe the go-to guy. I think in that game, the breakaway run, we haven't seen that speed. I didn't see that speed when you kind of watched his tape at Nebraska, and I thought he looked bigger and faster in his first game in Kentucky. We'll see if that plays out long term. But yeah, I think he was maybe the biggest surprise in a week one, and he looks like a guy that can be, a consistent force. In Kentucky, I think they feel really good about that 1-2 punch. They have at tailback. You're going to see number 3 McGowan, number 2 Dowdell rotating in. And again, like I think Dowdell's big sell was keeping the offense ahead of the chains, and that's what maybe their number one task. But they're going to need, some home runs from that running back room. And I think McGowan kind of proved he can do that more in his past. We haven't really seen it much from Dowdell, but you saw it on that one big run. So that's definitely, I think, got your antennas up if you're, Kentucky fan, because that can add an extra punch to the offense.
Not a great day throwing the football, as you mentioned earlier, by Calzada. Some experience, though, at wide receiver with Kendrick Law, Jamori Macklin. Those are two names that kind of jump off the page during the preseason. What'd you see out of the wide receiver room? And And the ineffective of the forward pass, was it more on Calzada? Was it route running? Was it the defense of Toledo? What kind of limited Kentucky in the passing game?
Yeah, I think you mentioned those two names. Jamori Macklin and Kendrick Law were expected to be the top two targets. Bush Hamden at Kentucky's like kickoff luncheon, Kentucky's offensive coordinator, pretty much said, yeah, everything we do in the passing game is going to run through Law. And then you get out there in the game, and he really wasn't. They really didn't have targets, or really didn't make a concerted effort to get the ball to Macklin and Law. Now, was that? Now, why did that happen? Was it something Calzada did, or were they slow playing? Like, what was going on there? So that's something I think we're going to find out more um, this week. But for the passing game, I think they got off to a rough start. I think Calzada got in his head a little bit. And then they had a stretch in this game between possessions 3 through 5 um, where they went interception, where Calzada like ball gets bad at the line, ball gets picked, kind of a tough play, interception, but then Calzada takes a bad safety. And then they have a chunk play. They're about to be in the red zone, and a tight end, Willie Rodriguez, fumble. So I think they kind of got in their heads a little bit in that game. So like they're trying to hit the reset button again with this passing game. But as the season plays out, the expectation still is that Macklin's going to kind of be their vertical threat potentially. But Law is going to kind of be the guy they get the ball, quick game, screens, jet sweeps, slants potentially, and just try to take advantage of his kind of run after catch ability. When they talk about him, the word that comes up is kind of a running back. So like they like what he can do. I think once he gets the ball in his hands, it's just getting the ball in his hands and giving him some space to operate. I would be pretty surprised if they don't come out early and make a concerted effort to get Law the football after what happened last week.
Very similar to other programs across the Southeastern Conference, four transfers on the offensive line. The lone Kentucky Wildcat holdover from last year, it appears, is Jager Burton. Did I say the first name right?
Yeah, Jagger Burton and Jalen
Jagger.
Farmer, the two returning starters.
I
Jalen
got you.
Farmer, right. Now, Jalen Farmer transferred in last year from
Right, I
Florida
got you.
originally.
Okay. Overall thoughts. I know they had the safety, but overall thoughts on that offensive front. The same things at Ole Miss. They've got a kind of a new offensive line. They've got new faces on defense, especially the secondary. There's a lot of meshing that has to go right. Your thoughts on the meshing of that offensive line this past Saturday?
Yeah, like if you were going to have a pie chart for how Kentucky spent money this offseason on the roster, the offensive line would be a huge chunk of that. Like they really spent their resources on fixing this. Kentucky, unlike I think some other offenses, can't really scheme around poor offensive line play. Like this has to be a strength for their football team for them to have success. So they hit the portal hard to get Shai Ospi, left tackle from New Mexico State, beat out Michigan for him. Joshua Braun, who was a multi-year starter at Arkansas, playing left guard, and then Alex Wolschlager, Bowling was an all-MAC right tackle. So this is a rebuilt offensive line. Week one, I think they were, if you're going to rank position units, they were towards the top for Kentucky just from play. They did what they should have done against a MAC defensive front, created movement in the run game. They slowly leaned on them, and then that's why you saw, I think, that big Dowdall run where he's not touched in the fourth quarter, and ran for over 200 yards, had an efficient day. Pass protection was leaky at times, but for the most part, Calzada had clean pockets to operate from. But a big key for Kentucky season is how good is this offensive line. If it's good, they're going to be able to play their style of ball, and they're going to create close games. They're going to have a chance to win games. If it's bad, they are in trouble. And so they need this offensive line to be good. And that was like a quiz, but this is the first test, right? Ole Miss is the first test in week 2. Did this rebuilt offensive line, can it go? Can it reset the line of scrimmage? Can it make an impact in an SEC game? And we're going to find out on Saturday, but Kentucky spent a lot of money to try to make that happen. We're going to see if they can make it happen on Saturday.
A lot of Ole Miss fans had nightmares following that Kentucky game because of the two big defensive tackles for the Wildcats. And I think their names escape me, but I think they're both in the NFL now. Does that sound right, Adam?
Yeah, Deion Walker's playing for the Bills right now. Yeah. And had a really good training camp.
So he just wreaked havoc on Ole Miss all day last year against Jackson Dart. On that defensive front, how did they restock that defensive front, and how did they look to you this past Saturday?
Yeah, Walker is now Walker is with the Bills, and then Keyshawn Walker's playing out at USC. So neither of them are on the team. But Kentucky has consistently recruited defensive line well. They've developed, I think, really well at this position, and they went in the portal and found some reinforcement. David Gusta from Washington State was a guy a lot of people wanted in the portal. Kentucky landed him, spent some money on him. So he's a guy they're really excited about, kind of going to play nose tackle, but also will shift out and be kind of a pass rushing three-tech defensive tackle. And then they're 8 deep, I think there. McQueese Humphrey Grace is another guy they added, tweaked his ankle last week, but he's listed as probable. He's expected to play. He was a first-team FCS All-American in South Dakota. He's a guy they're really excited about. And then their overall pass rush, they feel like they can really impact games with their rush. They've got multiple guys. They've got an interior rushers with Gusta now and some other guys that I don't think they've had in the past. And they've got some guys that I think can turn the corner. Steven Souls had a big game last year, but Cam Olds was a Kent State transfer that's got some pass rush potential as an edge rusher, and they got some young guys that are really coming on. The big question with them is just the run defense. Where is the run defense at? And can they create enough passing downs? That is the big question. It looked really good in week 1. We'll find out if it can do it again. But if Kentucky's defense can stop the run and create passing downs, their secondary is really experienced. And they got the guys, I think they believe they can have their best pass rate unit in a few years this year. And so their plan is going to be stop the run, create passing downs, and then kind of wreak havoc and try to create some turnovers on second and longs and third and longs. And they seem like they have the pieces in place to do that.
At one point during the game, I think they held Toledo to 7 points, and I felt like it was a really good defensive game plan. You know, I know those are words are said a lot about a Mark Stoops defense. Davin Rayner, DJ Waller Jr., both transfers, and then Ty Bryant, the safety, has been a part of the team along with Jordan Lovett. So some names: John Queese Hardaway, the senior transfer. Who are some names Ole Miss fans could be looking for, whether it be a linebacker in the secondary, to be possibly making plays on Saturday?
Yeah, Alex Afari, number 3 at linebacker. He was a guy they recruited, to play cornerback. Then they moved him to safety. Then they moved him to kind of their hybrid big nickel position. And then last year they moved him again to inside linebacker. And he started, I believe, the last 5 games, Brad, and it was a struggle for him. But it seems like the light has came on. And he is a playmaker. He was a playmaker when he played that big nickel position for them, and he really popped in a big way against Toledo. He was the best player on the field, and he can run sideline to sideline. He can strike, and he's got a ton of experience. He's going to be a draft pick because if this linebacker experiment goes well, so he is probably Kentucky's, I'd say, their best player right now. Gusta, who I mentioned early, number 60, has got potential to be a game wrecker for them. And then their 2 cornerbacks are both really long. DJ Waller, number 5, and JQ Hardaway, number 6. Both have experience. And for the Stoop style, they want to play a lot of zone, and they want to clog holes. And they've typically been at their best when they've got long corners, and they have that this year. And so the windows for them, they try to make those windows smaller than they would be typically when you see a zone defense. And so those are really the players. I'd say 63, 5, and 6. Are kind of Kentucky's. Those are the players they need to play well consistently, and that's kind of their defense. But again, they do have a more of a well-rounded roster, I would say, this year, and they don't have the clear stars, but they have more depth, and their bet is that this is going to lead to more consistent play across the board throughout the season. But Brad White's been there a long time now, calling plays, and they have really high floor, and they're going to play good defense more times than not when they go out here.
What's the ceiling, in your opinion, for this team? 8-4, 7-5,
Yeah,
9-3.
I'd say.
What do you think?
I think if everything went right, like, and they hit on those things, they would probably go 7-5 is the ceiling. Like 7-5, you go 4-5 in the SEC games plus Louisville. That is the ceiling, I think, for this team. Because they didn't really make the huge kind of star swings in the portal. Most of their additions, I felt like, were just to try to raise the floor to prevent the collapse that they saw last year. And so I think they're probably looking at a season between 5-7 and 7-5, and we'll just see. And it's going to be, I think, based on these 50-50 games they get in, what that record ends up being. But it's a team we're going to get in the SEC, and I think we're going to see that they don't have necessarily the stars that some of these other teams have. So I think that lowers the ceiling a little bit. But this year for Kentucky is really just can we build a foundation and find stability again before we try to climb up? Because last year got so off schedule and off tracks. Right now they're just trying to get the cart back on the tracks and moving forward.
Just for those watching and listening, here's how Kentucky's schedule breaks down, and this is where Adam was referring to getting to 7 wins. It won't be easy. It would be easy for any team in the conference. The schedule is very difficult this year, especially if what happens with Auburn and Vanderbilt and they're as good as they possibly could, along with South Carolina. So open with Toledo, win that one. Ole Miss, I would think, would be a huge component for Kentucky getting to those 7 wins by beating the Rebels. Eastern Michigan, and then at South Carolina. Those are all games in which South Carolina could win. Then you go at Georgia. You would think that would definitely be a tough one to pull off. Come home against a Texas team that we don't really know right now. A Texas team that lost to Ohio State. And then Tennessee at home. I think anything can happen in that game as Tennessee's kind of breaking in Joey Aguiar, the new quarterback. Then you go on the road against Auburn. Who knows where Auburn will be at that point during the season? Come home against Florida, Tennessee Tech before going to Vanderbilt and to Louisville. So 7 is absolutely on the table for the Wildcats, but it's going to be tough. And you know, Adam, out of all of those games, and let's hypothetically say that history prevails and they're able to rekindle some magic from last year, and the Wildcats go 4-0. That sets up a 3 or 4 stretch run at Carolina, at Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee. What I feel like will absolutely kind of pave the way for Kentucky should they win on Saturday.
Yeah, I kind of look at the schedule like this. It's kind of a two-part schedule. Some of their most winnable games are after the halfway point. Like when you look at the winnable power conference games, you get Tennessee at home, you get Florida at home, at Vanderbilt, at Louisville. Like and then Tennessee Tech, you feel like you're gonna have a fighting chance in all of those to win all those football games.
Yeah.
The key is to get into that point at least 3-3, because you get there 3-3, and then you have a path, I think, to 6-6, 7-5. But you can only get there 3-3 if you beat one of Ole Miss or South Carolina. And so, like, I don't want to say Ole Miss is the most important game, but it feels like maybe a 1A. Like these 2 games in September with Ole Miss and South Carolina, and typically under Stoops, they've played some of their best games in September, early SEC games. So if they don't get one of these, it's like how much could it unravel? Because you mentioned that middle chunk when they have the buys mixed in there, it could be a long time without wins, right? Like if you lose to South Carolina, lose to Georgia, lose to Texas, that's a month they're going to go without winning a football game potentially. And so to build up some momentum and some just positivity early is, I think, imperative and really important for this football program. And that's why I think this game is so big. And if they don't lose this game, then that game at South Carolina becomes monstrous.
And you hate to use the words must win, and especially early on in the season. So, but the importance level of this game, honestly, you know, Adam, for both teams is incredibly high because the season for Ole Miss will be dramatically different if they lose this game against Kentucky.
Yeah, I think you look at, I don't want to speak for Ole Miss, but like they have 8 home games, right? The road slates are not, the road games outside of Georgia are very, very, very manageable. They might be favored in all those games. So like, I know they're resetting a little bit. There's a path, like the schedule's got a playoff path, right? It's just, can the team take advantage of that? Like you lose to Kentucky early, that would knock them off track a little bit. And so, but if you beat Kentucky early, you can build up some momentum and start rolling. So for them, like this win could be like big step in the right direction, where for Kentucky, they just really, really need some positivity and a good moment in the season. And we'll find out how it plays out Saturday afternoon, Kroger Field.
Yeah, before we go today, we kind of mentioned it at the top of the show, the path to victory for Kentucky. What is that path? And if we talked and Kentucky wins this game 28-24, I feel like it would be in the 20s should Kentucky prevail. What has to happen for the Wildcats to upset Ole Miss as we sit right now about a 10.5-point underdog?
Yeah, I think they have to run the football effectively and efficiently. I don't think it has to be run crazy, but you should look up and at the end of the game and thought, oh, they ran the ball well. I think on the other side, when you're watching this game, Kentucky has to win that line of scrimmage battle. Like when you're watching it, you should say, "Oh, Kentucky's winning this matchup." Those two are non-negotiables, I think. And then thirdly, I would throw in like turnover, special teams. Can you get a big play to kind of flip the game? Can you hit on a couple passes? And then can the defense do what they've done against Ole Miss the last couple times, which is hold them, to 21 to 24 points, essentially 17 to 24 points. And then can the offense score enough to win the game? And that's how I think that's Kentucky's blueprint to win. If they get down 2 possessions early, or if it becomes a game where almost borderline shootout, then they're going to be in real trouble. But if they can get Ole Miss to play in the mud, keep this close into the third and fourth quarter, I think they're going to have a really good chance.
He's Adam Luckett, does a great job covering the Kentucky Wildcat for Kentucky Sports Radio. That's KSR. It's also the On3 affiliate for the Wildcats. I want to say a special thank you to Ms. Tyler Thompson for being so kind to give me a lot of information about the Wildcats and also to hook us up, Adam. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Great intel. And be sure and follow Adam on Twitter. That's at Adam Luckett KSR. And we look forward to seeing you in Lexington in a couple days, Adam. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Brad.